Okay, and we are back here at 8:08 a.m. with Dave and Matt in the mornings. And as we do every Friday, we go check in with Scott Braddock with the Quorum Report. Good morning, Scott.
Morning, Dave. How are you?
We're doing well, and we are talking, as Scott keeps us informed on everything that is going on in Austin. And there's a lot going on in Austin this time of the year, huh, Scott?
Absolutely. If I sound a little groggy, we left the Capitol at about 12:30 early this morning. Overnight, you had what they call second reading deadline, which is one of the big deals as they try to get House bills over one of the key hurdles. If it didn't get tentatively approved by the House yesterday, and the calendar date yesterday, then it's not going to be Texas law. And so you hear one bill after another dying, and lobbyists out in the hallway, screaming as their legislation is passing away, and in some cases mercifully, and in other cases not so mercifully. But I'm all hopped up on coffee and ready to go.
All right. Well, Scott, what are some of the big bills that we that got dropped last night?
Well, one of the largest and most controversial was this one that was inspired by this fight in San Antonio over Chick-fil-a at their airport. I'm sure you've heard about this, talked about it.
Yep.
Yeah, we talked about it on the show this morning.
Yeah, and so this bill did not make it over the finish line last night. The LGBTQ caucus was able to kill it on what's basically a procedural move. It means somebody in the process did not do their job correctly. And so that sucker's dead. The author of that bill said it was unfortunate that they weren't able to pass that through the House, and maybe they can have the conversation now.
Well, what do they think that this is going to? Do you think this will die in the courts?
Well, it's as far as what happened in San Antonio.
Yeah,
not sure. I mean, it's an interesting question. I have been talking to people in both Democratic and Republican circles about this last night. There's some Republicans who were saying privately, why in the world didn't the San Antonio City Council, if they really had a problem with Chick-fil-A, why wouldn't they just say, we need restaurants that are open every day of the week? It could be that they're upset with them about their position on LGBTQ issues, so to speak. But Sunday is probably 20% of your business. At an airport. Interesting to me that Chick-fil-A has such a following. Look at the Wall Street Journal story about them. I think yesterday or the day before, that Chick-fil-A is just going gangbusters. I mean, this is not hurting their business.
No, it's helping their business. I think. And I know in Lubbock, you can go on a Tuesday afternoon at 3:00 to any of the Chick-fil-A's here, and there'll be a line with 5 or 10 cars in it.
Right, and that's part of the point. I mean, this bill goes down in flames, and I don't think that the dual lines at every Chick-fil-A here, and even in the liberal Austin area, I don't think they're going away.
Well, and Scott, the big thing I say is if they would have just kept their mouth shut there in San Antonio, nobody would have worried about it. Because they had plenty of restaurants that were wanting to be in the airport. It was just flat out, they opened their mouth and said something stupid.
Well, it was a statement, and whether people agree with it or whether they think it's stupid, it was definitely a political statement. So we'll see how it plays out. It was a political statement, so we'll see how it plays out. But I think there are Democrats and Republicans who thought that could have been handled a little more smartly by the San Antonio City Council.
Yeah. So also, it's one of the things that brought up the sales tax, something I was completely against, is apparently dead as well.
It's done.
The increase.
Between the time that we talked last week and now, a lot happened with it. You had the big three, the governor, lieutenant governor, and the speaker, come out on Friday afternoon and say basically they were doubling down on this.
Yeah, they doubled down.
Yeah, the conservatives and liberals alike were saying that they all hated. By Monday and Tuesday, it was dead. You had, I saw where Chad Hasty was tweeting out the fact that on y'all's text line at KFYO, that I think the overwhelming majority of listeners were against this thing. They heard from conservative radio hosts across the state who said that they thought it was, sort of a hoodwink kind of thing. And nobody trusts that the government, and we talked about this, nobody trusts that the government's going to raise taxes over here to reduce them over there. And that was the promise. And, the math just didn't work. You talked to Texas House and members and Senate senators as well, and they would say, that in their district it just didn't make sense to try to go sell it to people. That you have to make over $150,000 a year, and your property needs to be, something over $650,000, $700,000 home for this to even begin to benefit you. And so the governor, with some egg on his face, I think, he was sort of the face of this, and had to retreat. They just don't have the numbers. By Tuesday, you had the author of this proposal in the Texas House pulling it down and saying, we're not doing this. The Texas Senate passed a school finance bill without dissing this, but they passed a bill that basically says that they don't need it, that they're going to live within their means and not raise taxes on anybody, and try to make good on their promises to put more money in public schools. So it died sort of a quiet death. And maybe the San Antonio City Council could learn something from the Texas Senate, where they didn't really badmouth the thing they were against. They just made it impossible for that thing to happen.
Okay, so about the sales taxes, you've got we have the 1% increase, but there was also something along the lines of them trying to get taxes of people outside of the state that buy something in the state of Texas through online. How is that going?
Well, one of the things that they're looking at here is this Wayfair decision, one of the
right.
Court decisions that makes it possible for revenue to be collected, when people do make online purchases. And part of that is already being done. And it's not an insignificant number, of course, as more and more people continue to shop for everything online. It was kind of funny. I was looking at this. Yeah. Talking with some folks yesterday, and myself included, every stitch of clothing that I was wearing yesterday was bought online. So, from my socks to my glasses, everything's bought online. So I just don't go to the store anymore.
Yeah.
And so a
lot of us don't.
Government's going to get its revenue, and so they're looking at ways to do that.
Yeah. Well, what about these Republicans that are retreat in this fight to keep third-party candidates off the ballot? Was that a big issue?
It was a really interesting deal. Suddenly it became a priority, or it was made known to us that it was a priority of the leadership, that they wanted to sort of crowd out the libertarians and others who may want to run for, whatever, for state senate or state house. Basically, they were going to make it almost impossible for them to run because there are certain conditions you have to meet to be able to be on the ballot, gathering so many signatures, et cetera. And they wanted to basically double all of the provisions for that. As one House member said to me, this would basically be declaring that Texas is officially a two-party state. And the real motivation here is that you did have some Republicans barely eke out their elections last time. You had one in particular from Tarrant County who won his race with a plurality with just 49%, which would not be the case if there had not been a third-party candidate in the race. But the fear from some Republicans, and I think this is why it went down, otherwise it could have been a simple partisan fight where all the Republicans vote one way and all the Democrats vote another. But you had a lot of Republicans who said, wait a second, if you say to the Libertarians they can't run as a Libertarian, then that means they're probably just going to run as Republicans in the Republican primary and run against us, as those incumbents. That's what they were thinking. They were kind of nervous about that. And that already happened some already, right? I mean, you have, some folks who would say they're more Libertarian in their thinking who run as Republicans in a Republican primary. But I think if they were to go ahead and do this, what they were talking about, you'd have that happen a whole lot more.
Well, to those of us who are conservatives, this is not good news. I don't guess. Now I'm hearing a lot in the national news about how there's a real belief on the left that they can turn Texas blue. What do you think of that? There is certainly that thought, and I think one of the predominant arguments here among Republicans in Austin is that if the state is going to be trending more toward the Democrats, then the Republicans need to do everything that they can to sort of shore up their majority, and that's why they floated this thing at all in the first place. Although I think some of them, for the reason I gave about maybe Libertarians running in the Republican primary, I think that they thought it might be sort of like the exploding cigar in the old movies. This would not be a good thing, for the Republicans to have to fight even more among themselves when they ought to be fighting Democrats.
Hey, now I had heard that the Texas red light camera ban had made it past the second reading, but you put on our email that there was a catch. What is the catch on this?
Oh, the catch is something that we did discuss here on the show. Remember, there was the question about whether or not the final legislation would honor current contracts that are out there for those red light cameras in the city of Dallas, for example. They have an $80 million contract over the next 7 or 8 years that they sign that contract.
That's a long one.
Yeah, as the bill was passed out of the House, it had been amended such that those current contracts will be honored. And it sounds like the senator who's going to carry this in the Senate, Senator Bob Hall from East Texas, that he's okay with that provision. That he wants to say, okay, look, let's honor those current contracts. Those vendors, that they signed lawful contracts and they're going to get their money. Either way, they're either going to get it over the course of providing the service, or they're going to go to court and get it. And so this seems to be the compromise that was talked about earlier. The guy who was carrying the bill in the House, a guy named Jonathan Stickland from Bedford, Texas, he didn't want this compromise. He wanted to just have the cameras come down immediately all over the state, but he made that case. He lost the argument. And so the compromise version is what's moving forward.
Hey, I think it's got a better chance of passing all the way through anyway.
Well, I know how you feel about it, Matt.
Man, I'm anti-red light camera. I'll tell you what.
I think we got it from pull them down right now to we'll take what we can get.
I'll take what I can get. Scott. Unfortunately, we're running out of time, but we do want to give you a chance. Is there anything on Quorum Report that you want to highlight?
Right now, we have an in-depth analysis of what's really going on with these school districts as the school finance debate moves forward. They're moving into the conference committee portion of the legislative session, where the negotiators are working behind closed doors to come up with exactly what school finance system will be, living under here in Texas for at least the next 2 years and potentially the next decade. We've got that in the Daily Buzz at quorumreport.com. You can also sign up for our free emails there at quorumreport.com.
All right. Thank you very much, Scott. And glad to hear from you every Friday.